Chapter 11. No free ride for a free ride. Me. Ralph had a truckie's voice. He was rough as guts from smoking and from just being a truckie. If you've ever heard truckies on radios, their voice gets deeper from making their voices deeper when they talk to other truckies, so they all sound like manly men. It's incredibly rare to hear a nice, higher-pitched, well-spoken voice on the radio. This is why, when I went on the radio during the cane harvest season, some fuckhead played some porn to freak me out. They don't like women on the radio. They don't like high-pitched voices. It's not a turn-on for them. The porn wasn't about being turned on. The cockhead wanted me to turn off. They are like women in that they like big, deep, manly men voices. This gets them hard. Unfortunately, they still get hard over women though. When I drove up to Ralph's outfit in the truckie servo in Gorgetown, I hadn't even gotten out of the van when he spied me enough to say, "Guess what? I've got good news. You can ride with me all the way to Sydney." Big gravelly chuckles. I didn't feel danger from him oversharing. He was short, my fighting height and weight, though he had thicker calves and thighs than me. He had Coke bottle glasses on his little unfortunately attractive head. I could just knock them off and he wouldn't be able to find me. I should have been concerned about his blindness, really, but I was on a roll. Another reason I should have been worried was Ralph didn't drive a double-decker prime mover, even a single layer. He was in what was effectively a tow truck, with one vehicle on that, and a single-axle trailer with just steel springs, not airbags, was hitched to this. A Can-Am three-wheeler motorcycle sat on the front end of the trailer, and my van was to go on the back end. This setup is fine for transporting vehicles around smooth city roads. We were about to go on the roughest highways in Australia, and that Can-Am wasn't heavy enough to stop the trailer from bouncing. My van would bounce too, and when it bounced, the motorcycle would bounce. I was yet to find all this out. It was slow going, and we only made it to Tennant Creek. Seeing that place at night really breaks your heart. I saw young girls talking to tradie ute blokes through their car windows at the servo. It looked like sex work was on offer. I wanted to go film these pedos, but I'm sure Ralph wouldn't have had my back. As I walked out of the servo with my chips for dinner, this extremely high young local guy was coming towards me. I wasn't worried, and when he focused his dizzy eyes on me, he said in the most sad but relieved way, "Hey, missus." I could only utter a hey back. I wanted to ask him if he was okay. Obviously he wasn't, and there was nothing I could do. The fact he mistook me for a teacher, or more likely a juvie prison officer, was where he was at in his head. He was a teen, poor kid. Ralph was okay company. After having to assert my boundaries in the beginning, he gathered I was not into flirting, and not into him. I was going to sleep in my van each night. At Gorgetown, he'd probably only half joked that he'd join me in the back. I pointed out to him that there was no room, since it was smaller than a single bed. He made a truckie joke. "It'll be a 2 bums high load." Fucking hell. I found this funny, but I couldn't encourage it. They're all children and you've got to be strict. I'd catch him looking at me out of the corner of his eye like a perv. He had a wife who he was separated from but still lived with. You hear that a lot from cheating married males. And a daughter who was very autistic. I could tell that Ralph, though quite smart, was a bit behind the 8 ball when it came to life. He was, what you'd term in the old ways and days, a bit simple. That was fine by me. The next day was the Barkly Highway, the horizontal way to the Queensland border. I'd done it before on my motorcycle and had to carry fuel because there was nothing on it except a servo over 200 kilometres from the Queensland border. To describe this place as a servo was not doing it justice. It was one of the many cattle station fuel stops that weren't any of the big servo companies. They'd renovated it into a kind of resort with a beautiful gift shop and even an art gallery displaying Indigenous art. I loved exploring the whole place after the nothingness of the desert. There was even an old cattle truck cage used as a smoking area. I loved the recycling of this, with its high walls and metal artwork covered them. The quirkiest smoking area in any pub I'd ever been to, and good on them for treating us like people. It was slow going on the Barkly and Ralph setup. Nevertheless, he seemed to hit every bump. There was no way of avoiding them, even at 90 k's an hour, or 90 cents an hour, as truckers described it. Usually they were talking $1.30 an hour. This was to avoid saying high speed limits over the radio. I liked some truckie lingo, the non-sexual stuff. Stupidly, most of it was overtly sex-pesty. Horny weirdos. I'd rung my uncle in Darwin about not arriving, saying I'd found a truck to catch a lift with. I guess this sounded hitchhikey because I later found out he was quite worried. It's very fucked up that everyone assumes a woman is going to get attacked if she gets in with a truckie. There was no way that was happening here. I dropped $3,000 cash on these people, so I doubted they'd let that happen to their clientele. There would be no free ride for a free ride. The idea made me recoil. I nicknamed Ralph Scratch and Sniff. He'd scratch his back, then sniff his hand. Sometimes he'd sample it. So scratch, sniff and sample Ralph. I'd fight to the death not to be touched by him. Also, company policy didn't allow me riding up front like this. If Ralph made a wrong move with me, I could easily dob him into his bosses. We were all square. Still, this didn't stop Ralph from making the most of his position. We made a pretty unfortunate find in Camberwell. I got in the back to check the bike, and it had not only fallen over, the stand was snapped off. Holy shit, those bumps had been bad. I quietly suspected that I'd weaken the stand by tying it down onto it. I didn't let on to Ralph. He was kind of blaming my tie down of the bike, and I frustratedly pointed out to him that I'd done over 10,000 kilometres with my tie down technique, and it had never fallen. For Christine's sakes, I'd done this highway with no problems. We put the bike back up and tried a better tie down. Lucky Ralph was short, so he could fit in the back and do the ties, while I sat on the back of the bike to push down the shockies. So I was stuck with Ralph. I couldn't ride home with no stand. Well, I could, but I doubt servos would appreciate me leaning the bike against the fuel pumps whenever I went to pay, get food, and go to the loo. Fuck. I was pretty chipper though. These things happen. I shouldn't have accepted the lift in the truck. All sorts of reasons for blaming myself made me feel better. I was really careful to deny the fact that Ralph, even though he'd said he'd had no experience with tying down bikes, could have talked me out of it because of the roughness of both the road and the trailer. I was determined to be optimistic. This was a free ride after all. My optimism started to waver a bit when we got into some tiny country town that night. The servo was privately owned and had the most 1970s traditional truckie dining room I'd ever seen. They offered free showers in exchange for your keys, and I headed straight in there, not waiting for Ralph. The young woman behind the counter gave them to me with no question. She would have seen me alight from the truck. Ralph came barreling in after me and said very loudly within earshot of everyone dining at the tables, "She's with me, she's with me." I turned to him and said it was fine. The attendant gave me the key. "Oh, so you want just one key?" she asked before getting a key for Ralph. "The fuck we do, love." I didn't say this, just furiously shook my head. Poor Ralph had made a fool of his own self in front of everyone. Damn. I refused to feel like a bitch, though. I'd wake early every morning and go see if Ralph was up. He never was. Sometimes I had to get my stuff out of the truck, and me shutting the door gently would wake him. He'd be sullen and gruff with me if I did this. I wanted to say, "It's not my fault that you're hungover, mate. Bloody hell." Blind in the eyes and blind in the blood. I don't think he drank enough to get blind, otherwise he'd be knocking on my van door trying his luck. He'd cheer up eventually, and we'd easily chat our way down the middle of central Queensland. I'd even jumped on the back of the truck to run the engine of the car so Ralph could attach jumper leads and run the fuel pump that put diesel from the reserve tank into the main. I really liked that I could do this. I was a truckie's assistant. I even put on one of my old high-vis truck driving shirts. This was dual purpose, to look like I was a co-driver and not a girlfriend, and so I'd get shower keys easily. We were going to hook left into Rockhampton, where he had to pick up a trailer and vehicle and travel with his boss. Because of this, our convo was peppered with Ralph trying to come up with lies as to why I was in the passenger seat. I don't know why he couldn't have just admitted to the broken bike stand. I guess it would mean that the boss would know he'd transported me across the Barclay. Ralph's lies were filling the cabin, and it was a cabin that was already packed with shit, so much so that I couldn't put my feet on the floor. This was never going to be easy. I was intermittently texting friends about my trip, and Ralph anecdotes, Billy being one of them. She replied with appropriate support and also laughed along in the right places. She pointed out that I'd have an entertaining story to tell. It certainly wasn't over. There was more drama to come. The next night at another truckie servo, I went in first again and got the key. Ralph did the whole "she's with me" BS. I was pissed off as I went round the side of the building to the glass doors that led to the showers. I was racing to get away from him and have some solitude in the shower. The door pulled open, but it had a glass panel next to it that looked like the door slid open, and this panel was the opening. I hit it so hard with my face because of my rush to get in. I can't even remember the curse words I shouted. When I get hurt by something in surprise, I get angry. Ralph, the ever badly timed simpleton, was right behind me and exclaiming, "What happened?" I shouldn't have blamed him for not knowing. He was partly blind after all. I did blame him for foolishly trying to put his arm around me. "Don't touch me," I yelled. He asked me again, "What happened?" I went very quiet, which is the eye of the storm with me. I lifted the shower keys in my hand and fully pegged them straight at the glass panel. "That's what fucking happened. I ran into that." I paraded around a bit more, catching the blood from my nose in my hand. Fuck, it hurt. I quickly realized that anyone in earshot would think that Ralph hit me, particularly when I yelled, "Don't touch me." I got my shit together and went to the bathroom to survey the damage and to cool the fuck off. That was the most psycho I've gotten in a long time. While nose injuries do hurt like hell, both stinging and aching simultaneously, I know my anger was beneath the surface, all ready to erupt on Ralph for being trapped with him from my broken stand. Once in the shower room, I saw that blood wasn't coming out of my nose, so that was good. I'd copped a neat cut at the bridge where the thin skin stretches and splits. I could breathe through it and there was no other lumps. Thank fuck for that. For sitting in an ER room at the hospital with Ralph chit-chatting and scratching away would have driven me even more insane, if that were possible. When I returned the key, the young male behind the counter was smiling to himself. Fucking little incel. He would have seen and heard it all on the security cameras. Even if he did revel in the fact a woman had hurt herself, he could have pretended and asked if I was okay. When I openly admit my opinions to you that women are superior to males, this is why. This new generation that hate women so much they don't even hide it is why I don't want to be part of society. Why do I have to? These subhumans aren't worth the oxygen they take up. I'm glad I'm not a boy mum because I'd have to struggle with this opinion. The truth is, his mother probably thinks he's a good kid, unaware that he's here laughing at another woman around her age, nearly breaking her nose. I got a reprieve from the Ralph situation. He left me in my van at a servo in Gracemere just outside Rocky. He was only meant to go into Rocky to get a trailer and vehicle from the auctions and take it to his boss, who was on the way up from Brisbane. Instead, his boss broke down not far out of Brisbane. So Ralph's promise that he'd be back the next morning turned into 2 days. I didn't mind. It was boring, but it wasn't the worst thing that had happened on this trip. I even got into the illegal side of it and unscrewed the number plate from the trailer for Ralph. I was a true truckie, breaking the law. I found an engineering and welding shop nearby. The older fella in there was fantastic. He welded the bike stand back together and even painted it. He didn't want money for it. Amazing in this day and age. I managed to put it back on the bike too. I couldn't take it out and ride because I was freaked out that the automatic engine cut-off that kicked in if you didn't have the stand-up would prevent the motor from working. I thought I'd disconnected it, but I wasn't too sure. I was yet to learn how to put a stand spring back on. YouTube came to the rescue and I kicked myself that I didn't try it during my long wait. That night something weird happened. I heard a whole lot of bogan and farty cars in the parking lot and various drunken carrying on. Then I heard a girl screaming. She was screaming something I couldn't decipher. I got such a big chill that she was being raped. Fuck. Do I get out? Then I'd be in danger. So would the Can-Am. I'd spoken to the fella on the counter for the night when he dashed out for a durry. He was gay, so I figured he'd do something when a woman was being attacked. You couldn't trust a young male to make a call to the cops. They could have been friends with these fucking assholes. I just hoped it was a domestic and she was getting it off her chest by screaming at a bloke. It quietened down and I went back to sleep. I didn't want to think of how useless I'd been. I wouldn't have been able to ring the cops because I shouldn't be camping here in the first place. If only I jumped out with my machete and helmet on and scared the fuck out of them. I fully dream of attacking rapists mid-act. That would make me the proudest I've been in my life. It's because I wish someone had done that for me. Yuck, I hated the world. I was pretty raw when Ralph showed up and hitched me back on the truck. Let this journey be done. I didn't think I'd lose it again, but I did. I went psycho at a little place called Gin Gin. After tying the bike in as securely as we could, it had started to bounce over to the other side of the van. It was crushing against the wheel arch, which was very bad indeed. That could end up bending the foot gears and was already messing with the muffler bracket. There was nothing I could do, except take it out on Ralph. It was a hoarse whisper this time. I didn't yell, I just conscious streamed. It's not my fault this bike is moving around. You know this trailer has spring shocks and bounces around like a fucking basketball. Why didn't you warn me not to leave the bike in the back? I don't know how trailers like this bounce. You know who does? You sure fucking did. I'll tell you why you didn't tell me. You just wanted a chick riding up front. So my bike gets wrecked just because you're being a horny fucking male. There were heaps more motherfucker slurs in there. Ralph ended up walking away. I really needed to get that off my chest. There was no blowback from Ralph, so he knew I was right. I was right after I'd done that. And there'd be no more she's with me wherever we went. I'm sure Ralph would try to tell other truckies out of my earshot that he was riding me. He was my age, but he was a child, still subject to peer pressure and wanting to be accepted by other males. He didn't want to get angry back with me because he was also in the wrong with his company for letting me ride with him. And as we neared Brisbane, the lies piled up more and more. I said that I wouldn't bother lying. But I'll get in trouble, he protested like a little boy. I won't dob you in, I just can't carry the lie because I'm getting confused by all the details. I just meant that he should do all the talking. Luckily, we didn't need to go through that. I did have to go through more though. The free ride from Ralph certainly had consequences. We got into Brisbane and to his place where the car yard was. It was very dark and I didn't say a word. Didn't even wish him good night as I slowly toddled to the van. Tomorrow was going to be massive. Getting the bike out, hoping it worked, then riding over the border and dropping down through New South Wales. My joy at being able to go on a big motorcycle ride had been killed off with all the drama.